It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
You are now listening to the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Welcome back to the official Deaf Crocodile podcast. Back with you again. My name is Ryan Verrill, and I'm here with our next audio commentary episode. Now, this is for Deaf Crocodile release number 5, and that is for the next Patushko release, and that is Sampo. This is from 1959. Once again, the audio commentary here delivered by Steve Bissette. Hope you enjoy this one. Share with all your friends that may be interested in hearing audio commentaries on the go, that Deaf Crocodile is willing to share them with the world through their podcast. And we hope that you will listen to our next episode. See you then.
Hello, I'm Stephen R. Bissette, cartoonist, author, film historian, comics historian, teacher for 15 years at the Center for Cartoon Studies in White River Junction, Vermont, and I'm here speaking to you today as we all sit down to watch a terrific fantasy film, Sampo, from 1959. To my mind, Sampo is the equal of any biblical epic, any mythic heroic fantasy, or any fairy tale film of its era. It's a precursor to today's live-action CGI epic fantasy films and superhero blockbusters. There's elements and imagery in Sampo that later informed films like Yellow Submarine, Ridley Scott's Legend, and many others. If you'll forgive me the act of hubris, I'm going to open by paraphrasing the opening screen text that Jean Cocteau wrote for his classic fantasy film, Beauty and the Beast. Children believe what we tell them. They have complete faith in us. They believe that flowers grow in the footsteps of a beautiful woman. They believe a blacksmith's hammer can forge the sky, a powerful stallion, a sacred object capable of producing abundant riches, food, and salt. They believe that a witch can snatch the sun or turn to stone, that heroes can walk the ocean's floor, that music can sway blades and arrows. They believe in 1,000 other simple things. I ask of you a little of this childlike simplicity, and to bring us luck, let me speak 4 truly magic words, childhood's open sesame, once upon a time. The images that director Alexander Patushko put under this title sequence, the lamp and the harp image, and the very first sequence we're going to see in the live-action footage of the film of woodsmen falling trees, this all sets up the final act of Sampo quite eloquently. Patushko is showing us the props and the labor that will save the day in this classic epic. I'd also like to open by reading to you a quote from Finnish comic editor Juko Rukosenmäki, who wrote, "Sampo is the miracle machine of Finland's national epic Kalevala, which was used as the basis for the movie Sampo. The movie was produced as a Soviet-Finnish cooperation and featured several Finnish actors. J.R.R. Tolkien studied Finnish folklore, and Kalevala inspired him to write the stories of Middle-earth. Several characters and storylines in Silmarillion were based on the Finnish saga. Finnish painter Akseli Gallen-Kallela used Kalevala as an inspiration for many of his most famous works, as did Sibelius. Kalevala continues to inspire storytellers in Finland and abroad. Don Rosa made a Donald Duck adventure, The Quest for Caligula, in 1999, in which Uncle Scrooge is naturally looking for Sampo to make himself even richer than he already is. And the Finnish artist Sami Makkonen created a horror vision of the story in 2 contemporary graphic novels, Caligula and Sampo, in 2019 and 2020, unquote. And that's being read to you with Juko's permission. This beautiful opening is hopefully new to you. This is footage that we've seen here in America since 1963, but most of us have seen it in murky pan and scan prints of the American release version, The Day the Earth Froze. And I'll be talking quite a bit about how that came about and its release history after we share some information about how this film, Sampo, was made in the first place. Sampo is often mocked today by contemporary viewers, but the miraculous Sampo, which I'll discuss when we get to it, is no less marvelous, absurd, or arbitrary than the magical devices and fetish objects of today's superhero films, the DC Comics-based films, and especially the Marvel Comics universe. They're filled with such similarly outre fantastic things. Jim Starlin's comic book concept of the 6 soul gems, the Infinity Gauntlet that's sought by Thanos in the internationally successful and beloved Avengers movies. All of that is the contemporary twist on folkloric and mythic objects like the Sampo. So the American retitling of this film as The Day the Earth Froze is curious in and of itself. As you can see from these opening minutes, I mean, this is not a science fiction movie at all. That retitling, The Day the Earth Froze, was riffing on a whole chain of 1950s science fiction films. The Day the Earth Stood Still from 1951, Roger Corman's The Day the World Ended in 1955, Sam Katzman's Night the World Exploded in 57, Italy's The Day the Sky Exploded from 58, and most contemporary to this film's American release, and probably the reason distributor Roger Corman chose the title The Day the Earth Froze, Val Guest's The Day the Earth Caught Fire from 1961. Was very much still fresh in the public's mind. When this was released here in the U.S., it was cut down. It was not specifically re-edited. In fact, in revisiting the film to prepare for this talk with you, I was amazed how true to the original Sampo, The Day the Earth Froze, really is. But Corman and the interns that he hired to see to the recutting and the professionals he hired to see to the dubbing reduced the length of the film by about 24 minutes. And I'll point out to you when we get to the sequences what it was that they cut specifically. The amazing thing about the making of this film is that each scene in this film was shot 4 times total using 2 cameras. The film was produced in both the Finnish language and the Russian language. Dialogue was dubbed afterwards by the respective Finnish and Russian voice actors. And in both a standard version and an anamorphic widescreen version, which is what we're enjoying here right now, the film used the SOV color film process, and this was the first Finnish film to feature surround sound with 4 channels. So if you have that capacity at home, definitely set it up for surround sound. Let's meet our characters and our actors. The fellow on the log, very talented logsman, is our hero, Lemminkainen, played by Andres Osens. And in America, they changed his name to John Powers. Who knows what reason? I'll talk a little bit about that. And this is Eve Kevy as Anarchy, our heroine. In the American version, Eve's name was credited in the cast list and on posters as Nina Anderson. And as you can see, Anarchy has a superpower. Anarchy is not only friends with all the creatures in the forest, but when she speaks, where she walks, where she lingers, flowers grow. And there's a punchline to that later in the film. Andres Osens, who's playing Lemminkainen here, was born July 14th, 1935, in Latvia. He died on March 13th, 2004, still living in Latvia. He was reportedly a Forestry Agriculture Academy student. He was active in the faculty's amateur drama group, and that's what led to him being cast here in Sampo as the hero. However, Andres was so dismayed with the length of time that was demanded for being part of this production. This production took 1 to 1.5 years for him to do his part in the film, that this remains his only screen role. After he finished work on Sampo, he decided that's it. He was done with being a film actor. Eve Kevi was born May 8th in 1938. She is Estonian in heritage. In 1959, the year that Sampo was released, Eve graduated from Estonian Drama Theater's Learning Studio, and she went on to work at Talent Film and Mosfilm. Since 1955, Eve had appeared in about 50 films, very extensive filmography. And from 1965 until 1972, Eve was married to speed skater Anson. And she gives a wonderful performance in this film. Not a lot is asked of her, but she gives a great performance. This is Anna Arochko playing the witch Lohi. I think she gives a tremendous, majestic performance in this film as its primary villainess. In the American release of this film, as The Day the Earth Froze, Anna's name was changed in the credits and on the posters to Ingrid Elhart. From the Renaissance film release 1963 press book for the American release of Sampo under the title The Day the Earth Froze, this is some of their promotional tips for American theaters showing the film. Advance publicity. The Day the Earth Froze, powerful, colorful, gigantic production, a Renaissance film release, no expense spared to bring the outstanding feature to, insert name of theater here. Let's talk a little bit about the fake biographies that were given these actors in the American release. Annike's role, Nina Anderson. Here's what the press book for The Day the Earth Froze said about her. Nina Anderson, this cultured beauty contest winner, although a native of Helsinki, has strong American loyalties by way of her Bostonian father, an import-export business executive in Finland. Nina came by her acting career completely by chance and quite unexpectedly. A pre-medical student at the university, she was persuaded by an ardently stage-struck girlfriend to accompany her to a play casting tryout at a local theater. When director Otto... Sorry, laughing. Director Otto Oessen saw Nina, her career was assured. Once persuaded to act in a series of classic Greek plays, the theater became her prime interest. At 24, she has done much notable theatrical work in Finland, which has led to several movie offers from other European directors anxious to capitalize on her talent and her Grace Kelly quality. She is, however, a girl who likes to take things slowly. Besides her many suitors, she's kept busy by her activities as a student, poetess, stamp collector, and figure skater. Here's a sequence that may evoke memories for many of you. I mean, this anticipates the whole sequence in the original 1977 Star Wars. And here is our witch casting her cloak. Her cloak is like a living being in this film. It lives and it expires like a living sentient creature. I love how simple and yet effective these special effects that Petushko and his technician's craft. The cloak does not fly like a kite, per se, and in fact, watch how alive it looks as it moves into place. Now, these songs that are so central to this film were entirely cut from the American version. There was a real aversion to including the songs. Perhaps they considered them ridiculous. Perhaps they considered the dubbing process complicated by them. But the use of songs are essential to this film in its original form. So Aniki climbs onto her boat, and she's ready to wistfully sail off, and here comes the witch's cloak. Shoop. And she is off to a new destination against her will. We're coming up on one of the sequences trimmed from the American version. And before we get there, I just want to mention that the two screenwriters for this film, Gregory Jagdfield and Victor Vitkovich, this was their first collaboration on a fantasy film, working with Alexander Petushko, and the two writers later collaborated on two more fantasy feature films. Attention, There's a Magician in the Town in 1964, and Aladdin and His Magic Lamp in 1967, and a little later I'll point out some of the aspects that they altered from the epic poem that this is adapted from. So here we are joining Aniki in this realm of Pojala, which is where the witch Lohi lives. And Lohi drags our heroine up to what is going to be her prison for this first arc in the narrative.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
So this sequence coming up after the door is shut and after this amazing shot of Lohi, this was trimmed from the American version of the film. This whole magical aspect of Aniki sending out a wisp of her hair, fly, fly, Goldilocks, to the courtyards of Kalevala, and that this is how she will get her message to her beloved. And this is really a wonderful sequence. This also may have been cut because of what our hero is about to do. Lemminkainen is out hunting with his bow and arrow. And we're about to see a moment of predation between a raptor, its prey, and what Lemminkainen does after he hears the voice of his beloved. Oh, I love this magical bit where he has the vision of the witch holding his beloved captive, lets the arrow fly, the raptor falls. Okay, so in the American version, because that sequence is missing, we're not sure how Lemminkainen knows what has happened to Ilmarinen's sister. Ilmarinen, by the way, is a key character in this epic poem, played here by Ivan Voronov. He's a super-powered blacksmith. I don't know how else to put it for a 2022 American audience. In the American version, Day the Earth Froze, they changed Ivan Voronov's name to Peter Sorensen for no apparent reason. And now we are meeting a character who's very central to Finnish folklore. Wainamoinen, also pronounced Vainamoinen. He's played here by a Finnish actor named Urho Sommersalmi, who was born in September of 1888, died quite tragically, April 12th, 1962. Urho worked in Finnish National Theatre from 1908 to 1958, half a century of theatrical work. And he was usually seen in his prime in the roles of the heroes and the lovers. And as he aged, of course, and his physique changed, those roles fell away from him. He was awarded the Pro Finlandia Medal in 1948. He married, early in life, he married an actress, Aili Sommersalmi, back in 1912, and they stayed together all their lives to the bitter end. Sommersalmi was involved in Finland's film industry right from the beginning. In 1913, he'd had his first film role in a film called Sylvie, which was reportedly the first drama film made in Finland. And this was his final role in Sampo, playing Wainamoinen. In April of 1962, Sommersalmi, for reasons unknown, killed his beloved wife with an axe. And what makes it all the more tragic is it was an axe that he had been given as a gift from the Finnish Actors Union. And then he hung himself in a ceiling lamp hook in the room. And since then, it's been claimed by some that Sommersalmi's ghost has been seen and heard knocking around the Finnish National Theatre. He's now believed to haunt that theater. What's odd about this tragic end is that, in its way, it mirrors or it echoes the fate in lore of Wainamoinen. And I'll talk a bit more about that when I talk more about that character. This is a terrific sequence. This is Aniki finding the winds, the elements that Louhi the witch has imprisoned here in her caverns. Just a brilliant sequence, and setting up much of what's to come in the later acts of the play as these imprisoned winds and mists are mobilized to various tasks by various characters. By the way, there were radio spots created for the release. This is from the press book for The Day the Earth Froze. Radio spots. A complete radio campaign on The Day the Earth Froze is available to you in one 45 RPM record at Renaissance Film Release. The record contains one 60-second spot, one 30-second spot, and one 20-second spot. Each spot is open for a live tag. These spots have been designed to sell the excitement of The Day the Earth Froze with a strong commercial point of view. Sampo was a remarkable feat of co-production in its day. The first announcement I found in it, in any English-language Soviet publication, was in Soviet Film, the first issue from 1958. Soviet Film was a state-funded, state-published propaganda publication, essentially, and they would put out 4 issues a year. And in Soviet Film, first issue from 1958, they announced in the section at Soviet Film Studios, quote, Mosfilm and Suomi Films, a Finnish studio, are making a joint widescreen color film entitled Sampo, based on the Karelo-Finnish epic rune Kalevala. Location shooting is taking place in Finland and the Crimea. Shooting on lot is being done at Mosfilm. The cast includes the Soviet actors E. Kivi, Ada Wojcik, and I. Voronov, and the Finnish actors Sommersalmi and Lurema. The producer is Alexander Petushko. Now, this co-production also was very important in Finland. Sampo was a co-production of Suomi Film, and this year that it was released, 1959, was in fact the 40th anniversary of Suomi Film. They opened their doors in 1919, and they were celebrating their 1959 slate of feature films, and Sampo was quite prominent among those. If you can find it online or get your hands on it, there is a terrific black and white promotional short called Finlandia Katsaus, which translates as Finland Review. There's an episode entitled Sampo Tekimasa, which translates roughly as Doing Sampo or Making Sampo. And the subtitle is 1957 to 1959, denoting the 2 years that was put into the production of this film. The studio head at Suomi Filmi was Risto Orko, who's listed in some sources, particularly in Finland, as co-director of Sampo. He was born in Rama, and he worked in the film industry for over 60 years. Rose to be the head of production at Suomi Filmi and a chief director in the 1930s. And Orko was the CEO at the Finnish studio starting in 1945. They produced hundreds of films, numerous shorts, and it appears that Orko's primary directorial career ran from about 1933 to 1943. He died in Helsinki. He was 102 years old when he passed away, and this was a great period of mourning in Finland. He became known after his death as the last Finnish film tycoon. I love this sequence here, where our witch is instructing the heroes that before she can release Aniki, that they have to plow her field of vipers. And this is lifted directly from the epic poem. Let's talk for a moment about the character of Ilmarinen, the blacksmith. I mean, he's a very magical character in Finnish lore. The actor playing him, Ivan Varnov, had a number of film roles, and then starting in 1967 seems to have primarily done a lot of TV movie work in Russia. TV movies like Mitya in 1967, and then a whole procession of TV features from 1969 until 1982 with his last film role. And the character he's playing is in the Kalevala. He's a god. In Finnish mythology, he is an immortal. He's capable of creating practically anything with his blacksmithing skills. But he's also depicted in various epic poems as being very unfortunate in love. Here we're seeing him create out of his forge a living stallion. This is just an amazing sequence. This is something that Soviet Film put on the cover of their 1959 issue that featured Sampo as its cover story. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Very simple, bold use of color, but very powerful. And then the switch in color to the viper-filled field, the deep blues and grays with the red stallion standing out against it. Really striking. This sequence, by the way, is adapted from earlier versions of runes that informed the Kalevala. There's one earlier rune in which Ilmarinen is the hero, takes a journey in search of love. He's competing for a daughter that he hopes to betroth. He obtains his wife in that particular rune after completing the task of plowing a field of vipers, as well as bringing home a bear and the pike of a character named Tuoni. But in this version, it is our hero Lemminkainen who has to plow the field with the help of Ilmarinen.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Louhi, as a character in Finland's lore, is always a witch. She has, in some of the stories associated with her, the ability to be a shapeshifter. She can change her form. She can create mighty enchantments. In some of Finland's folklore, she has a number of daughters who characters like Lemminkainen and other heroes try to woo and win. And in each case, Louhi sends impossible to complete tasks that must be performed if the heroes are to claim her daughters as their brides. And all of this, in many of these versions, lead to the forging of the Sampo. Here's another example of Louhi's treachery, having her lackeys destroy their ship, and now we are going to witness yet another miraculous feat from the forge. As I said, Ilmarinen can make anything, and this is a clear example of that. Let's talk a little bit at this point about what is the Sampo. Mystery Science Theater has quite a bit of fun with the American version of this, The Day the Earth Froze, mocking, the arbitrary and ill-defined nature of the Sampo. But as I've already said from the outset of this conversation with you, I don't think it differs that much from the kind of devices, objects, fetish objects that are central to so many fantasy films, video gaming, superhero stories, and so on. So what is the Sampo? Well, let's see. In the Kalevala, it was interpreted to be a mill of some kind that was created in a forge by our blacksmith god here. And once the mill was forged, it was an object that could make things, flour, salt, and gold. It could weave these almost like a form of mystical alchemy out of thin air. Think of the tablecloth in the fantasy film Ilya Muromets, in which our hero in that film, Ilya, is imprisoned for years and years and years, and yet he doesn't starve to death because his beloved has woven a magical tablecloth for him that produces food. The Sampo is sort of like that. It's also a bit like the cornucopia that most Americans are familiar with as a symbol, if you will. It produces endless food, endless goods. The Holy Grail. In some versions of the Holy Grail myth, the Grail creates goods and foods. And in Japanese folktale, there's an object called the Shiofuki Usu, which is a grindstone which can create anything. And much like the Sampo, that Japanese folktale involves that object being lost to sea, where it ceaselessly creates salt, and that's why the ocean is salty. Think about Jesus and the miracle of the loaves and fishes, where food is created seemingly out of thin air to feed the masses, and so on and so on and so forth. There's many, many versions and variations on the Sampo and other mythology. But the Sampo is central not just to this film, but also, of course, to its source, the Kalevala. In one of the English translations of that epic poem, reads as follows: Ilmarinen, worthy brother, thou the only skillful blacksmith, go and see her wondrous beauty, see her gold and silver garments, see her robed in finest raiment, see her sitting on the rainbow, walking on the clouds of purple. Forge for her the magic Sampo, forge the lid in many colors, thy reward shall be the virgin. Thou shalt win this bride of beauty, go and bring the lovely maiden to thy home and Kalevala. So, in the epic poem, Ilmarinen works for days and days and days, and he is unsuccessful in various stages of creating the Sampo. When he succeeds, the poem, that passage of the poem concludes, on one side the flour is grinding, on another salt is making, on a third is money forging, and the lid is many-colored. Well, the Sampo grinds when finished, to and fro the lid in rocking, grinds one measure at the daybreak, grinds a measure fit for eating, grinds a second for the market, grinds a third one for the storehouse. And then later in that epic poem, Louhi, of course, steals the Sampo, and then Ilmarinen and our hero in the epic poem, Wainamoinen, enter Louhi's stronghold in secret and retrieve the Sampo, but Louhi chases them. There's a battle, and in the struggle, Louhi is vanquished, but the Sampo is destroyed. That has been altered for this film version, as we shall see. What I wanted to spend a little time talking to you about at this point, as we're seeing the forging of the Sampo, is in the epic poem what went, the stages of the creation of the Sampo. I won't go into all the complicated backstory because it involves characters who are very different from the characters as they're portrayed in this film, and characters who aren't in this film. But regardless, once the forging begins, Ilmarinen gazes into the flames. He sees that the metal has taken the form of a crossbow with a golden arch, a copper shaft, and that the arrow tips are made of silver. But he notes that the entire contraption seems to have an evil spirit embodied within it, asking that a new victim be killed each day by this bow and arrow. So Ilmarinen breaks it up, casts the pieces back into the forge, and begins again. That's day one. And on day two, he creates a metal ship from the fire, which has ribs of gold. The oars are gleaming copper, and it's very beautiful. But again, he senses that this ship is evil at heart, and it's a ship that craves war. So Ilmarinen breaks apart this incredible ship that he has created in his forge and throws all the pieces back into the fire to create on the third day a new object, which is a cow made of steel with golden horns and, according to the poem, the sun and the stars on its brow. But it's a badly tempered bovine, and so this incredible cow has to be smashed into pieces, melted down, thrown back into the forge. On the fourth day, Ilmarinen creates a golden plow, which he pulls from the forge. It has a golden plowshare, a copper beam, and the handles of the plow gleam silver. But again, he perceives that this is not a perfect object, that it would plow up planted fields, and it would destroy meadows that are already thriving. And at this point, he's getting despondent, understandably, so he destroys this, throws it back into the forge. He's furious at himself, so he conjures the four winds to fan the flames, and with the winds fanning the flames for another 3 days, finally, the glorious object we're seeing on screen here, interpreted by Alexander Patushko as a variant on the Stone Flower from his 1947 fantasy film, The Stone Flower. In the original form, the Sampo takes the shape of a magic mill, and it's this mill that can create grain, salt, and gold. And Ilmarinen is happy with his creation. He presents it to Louhi, and she immediately seizes it and locks it up in a vault underground in her lair. And within the epic poem, Ilmarinen is able then to claim his wife, but his chosen wife refuses to leave her native land, and he goes back home alone in the poem. But that's not what happens here in the film. Let's get back to the film. So now that the Sampo has been created, and hopefully I've explained enough to you about what the Sampo is, that you'll accept it as the magical object that it is in this film. Anaki and Lemminkainen are reunited, so flowers are blooming because her happiness is spawning flowering forms out of barren rock, such as their superpower, as you'll recall. So they bid them adieu. And we now return to Louhi's lair. I love this. This is the punchline I talked about, where they're so incensed by these beautiful flowers that they have to tear them up. I think of the Warden of Alcatraz in the Clint Eastwood film directed by Don Siegel, Escape from Alcatraz, where Patrick McGowan as the warden is always crushing flowers. Okay, so our heroes and the betrothed of Lemminkainen, Annikki, sister of Ilmarinen, are going back home, and she asks what it is that they had to do in order to procure her release. And when they reveal that they had to forge the Sampo and give it to the witch, she is despondent, and this prompts Lemminkainen to say, well, okay, if that's how you feel.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
I will go. It's about time I, too, did some manly chores. I guess plowing that field of serpents wasn't manly enough. Okay, so this sequence coming up is partially in the American version, partially, there's a long stretch here is cut from the American version, and I'll point out those differences to you as the film unreels. So Lemminkainen returns to shore, draws his blade, and Louhi, with her usual trickery, is coaxing him in. I love this beer sequence where they load amphibians into his beard. This is missing from the American version, which is too bad, because it sets up and it contrasts with the presentation of the brew during the wedding to the elder. Okay, so he's turned down the drink for obvious reasons. I don't know how many of you would imbibe a brew that had frogs leaping out of it. He foolishly declares that he's there to steal the Sampo, which of course is not going to go over well, as you can see from the faces of those gathered. And Louhi tricks him up toward the lairs, trying to negotiate with Lemminkainen. She beckons him into her lair. Now, this entire sequence involving Louhi's trickery, what she does to Lemminkainen, is what's missing from The Day the Earth Froze. And this is one of two passages, quite lengthy passages, that were trimmed from the American film. I think I understand why they would have taken it out, and I'll talk a bit about that during the sequence. Because we essentially, here in Sampo, we have our hero, Lemminkainen, coming to Louhi's lair, giving up his weapon, and this is the first time in the film, significantly, that the hero will lay down his sword, literally in this case, and as he goes inside, the witch will have her way. Beautiful shot here of the Sampo. This is what is cut from the American version of the film. This whole thing with the serpent, her instructions to the serpent, and her application of the serpent's bite. Okay, this is what will be new to any American viewers of the film. So Lemminkainen is essentially dropped into a death-like coma at this point. Now, this is very typical of folk tales, tales of mythology from all cultures around the planet, fairy tales, and so on. Lemon Common, our hero, is now reduced to the Sleeping Beauty, if you will, of this particular narrative. And he's carried off and very unceremoniously tossed into the drink. So let's talk a little bit about what happened with the American version. And I'll shift gears a couple of times during this part of the conversation, so bear with me. I'm curious, I wanted to lay out for you some of the context of the times in which Roger Corman, when he purchased this film for American release, what was the nature of what was happening between the USSR and America, without my going into politics, with my focusing on the film industries. So among Roger Corman's immediate contemporaries, two key figures jump to mind: Ray Harryhausen and Charles H. Schneer, who at the time when Roger Corman was still making low-budget science fiction films, Ray Harryhausen and Charles Schneer made the leap from 1950s science fiction monster movies like 20 Million Miles to Earth to heroic fantasy films via their 1958 color smash hit, The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. And thereafter, with only a couple of deviations, Harryhausen and Schneer stayed in that groove. Three Worlds of Gulliver, Jason and the Argonauts, their two Sinbad sequels in the 1970s, and so on. By the way, this sequence is in the American version of the film, with Anneke speaking to her brother, Ilmarinen, and the sequence that follows with Lemon Common's mother is also in the American film. This sequence here, where she, in typical fairy tale terms, goes and speaks to three living aspects of the landscape: a birch tree, a living path in one of the great sequences in this film, and finally the sun. And that communication with the sun is quite important because it sets up the importance of the sun being the object that Lohi is going to steal later in the narrative. By the way, look at the brilliant forced perspective shot here. Okay, what appears to be in the far distance is actually in the deep foreground. And as Lemon Common's mother implores the path, we see it rise as a living being and speak to her. This optical shot is not a special effect optical shot. That is a foreground miniature closer to the camera lens than the mother. And by having her eye line with her looking what appears to be in the distance, and by having the actor who's playing the road in our foreground, it's being photographed at the same time. This is the kind of camera magic that directors like Alexander Petrushko were masters of, as with Mario Bava in Italy, and so on. From the press book for the American release, The Day the Earth Froze, some of their promotional suggestions. Outdoor stunts. Motorcycle rider in a special costume with caption on the back, "The Day the Earth Froze. Ask me for a magic coin and you will get free popcorn at the" insert name of theater here. Okay, so back to what was going on in America. So Roger Corman's looking at this film and he's going, how can I sell it? So for some reason, he didn't think of the success that Ray Harryhausen and Charles Schneer had with Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. He did think of that with another Alexander Petrushko film that he purchased, which was the film Sadko from 1952, which Roger Corman turned into The Magic Voyage of Sinbad and released through Roger Corman's film group studio in 1962. Also, because of the success of The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, we had a whole stream of faux Sinbad Arabian Nights Heroic Fantasies. UPA's first animated feature was Mr. Magoo in 1001 Arabian Nights. Came out in 1959, the same year as Sampo. Jack the Giant Killer in 1962, where producer Edward Small, who had said no to working on Seventh Voyage of Sinbad with Ray Harryhausen, regretted his saying no and then tried to cop every lick from Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. Bert I. Gordon, who had been making, The Amazing Colossal Man and Attack of the Puppet People for American International. At the same time, Roger Corman was making films for American International. Came out with The Magic Sword in 1963. Oh, look at this. Okay, so this entire sequence is missing from the American version. I have to wonder if it's not just the issue of Lemminkainen being, going to the Witch's Realm and then being spirited back from the Witch's Realm and then going back to the Witch's Realm, a lot of to and fro. I also wonder if the imagery of Lemminkainen's mother walking on the water was considered, maybe some of the states in the South are going to have a problem with this. Is this the kind of imagery we want out there in the Bible Belt? Are they going to object to it? Is this going to be controversial? I may be reading too much into it. So this shot is in the American film, with Lohi emptying, the bounty that's being produced by the Sampo into the forge. But then all of this that follows with Lemminkainen's mother is not in the American version, where she comes to Lohi and asks, "Where's my son?" Okay, and going back to, what was happening with American fantasy films at the time that Corman was contemplating what to do with Sampo, we also had MGM releasing the American-German co-production, the King Brothers and Bavaria Film Studios co-production of Captain Sinbad in 1963, and American International Pictures turned Toho's Japanese box office hit, The Samurai Pirate of 1963, which starred Toshiro Mifune, into The Lost World of Sinbad, which they did not put into American theaters until 1965. Also in 1959, a big breakthrough, the Russian animated feature The Snow Queen from 1957 was sold to Universal Studios, the first major American studio to purchase a USSR production to release into the United States of America. And if you're interested in knowing more about that process, please listen to my commentary track on the companion release of Ilya Muromets with this film. We also had a whole cycle of fairy tale cinema and television happening here in the United States. On network TV, there were live telecasts in 1955 and 56 of the Broadway production of Peter Pan, performances of the smash hit Tony Award-winning 1954 Broadway production, which starred Mary Martin as Peter Pan, Cyril Ritchard as Captain Hook. NBC TV telecast Peter Pan live in 1955, in 1956, and in 1960. With the same Broadway cast, and then they annually rebroadcast all through the 60s that 1960 recording of Peter Pan. In late 1955, the Hallmark Hall of Fame presented a live telecast of the 1932 stage adaptation of Alice in Wonderland, and it was in 1956 that the first American TV broadcast of MGM's 1939 The Wizard of Oz, starring Judy Garland, proved to be a ratings hit on television. And that same year, the first live version of Rodgers and Hammerstein's only musical crafted for television, Cinderella, followed, starring Julie Andrews, and both the MGM Wizard of Oz and Julie Andrews as Cinderella drew huge audiences here in America on television. MGM sold CBS TV the rights to televise The Wizard of Oz for $225,000 per broadcast. And they debuted that in November 3rd, 1956. It scored incredibly high ratings. CBS reran it December 13th, 1959. They snagged an even larger audience, and Wizard of Oz became an annual television tradition here in America all through the 60s and early 70s. October of 1957, NBC presented a live-action musical adaptation of Pinocchio, starring Mickey Rooney as the animated puppet boy. The Pied Piper of Hamelin musical was the first made-for-TV color feature. NBC TV broadcast that November 26, 1957. It starred Van Johnson, Claude Rains, Laurie Nelson, Jim Backus. They were speaking dialogue that was primarily spoken in rhyme, which, again, makes it curious to me that Roger Corman chose to remove the rhyme, the song aspect from Sampo that we're watching and listening to right now. By the way, again, this entire sequence with the mother bringing Lemon back is cut from the American version, this whole sequence. As it unreels, I'll continue chronicling what was happening with fantasy and fairy tale cinema while Roger Corman was pondering what to do with Sampo. So that 1957 TV movie of Pied Piper and Hamelin, very significant. It was shot on 3-strip Technicolor, not on videotape. And it was very popular, yielded a popular soundtrack LP record. It was rebroadcast in 1958. Then it was packaged for syndication as a movie, rerun annually in many regional markets here in America, before it also had a theatrical matinee run in 1966. And it also appeared in just about every 16-millimeter rental catalog I ever laid hands on as a kid growing up and all the way into my college years. In 1958, there was a live musical version of Hansel and Gretel with Barbara Cook and Red Buttons on television. Cole Porter wrote a version of Aladdin, which starred Sal Mineo and Basil Rathbone, also broadcast in 1958. And ABC TV had Sergei Prokofiev and Ogden Nash's musical comedy mesh of marionettes and classical music in a special called Art Carney Meets Peter and the Wolf. MGM scored a big hit in theaters with George Powell's Tom Thumb that same year in 1958. And in 1959, January of 1959, the year that Sampo was released in Russia, Finland, and many other countries, Walt Disney released Sleeping Beauty, adapting its musical score from the 1890 Tchaikovsky ballet. It was the first animated feature in Super Technorama 70 widescreen process, the second full-length animated feature in anamorphic widescreen. In key city markets, Sleeping Beauty was presented in Super Technorama 70 and 6-channel stereophonic sound, and in a flat 35-millimeter version for wider release. It did not do well. It cost $6 million to make, but it only brought in $5.3 million in theater rentals. And that underperformance resulted in Disney rethinking their whole approach to animated features altogether.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather, now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
This is some of their promotional tips for American theaters showing the film. Float, if possible, with public address system, distributing handbills. Dealing with violence and romance mixed with fantasy and ancient legend, it will thrill adults as well as children. Starring Nina Anderson and John Powers. See it. It is something new for all. Prior to Sleeping Beauty, other than Disney's reissues of earlier Disney fairy tale animated features, Disney had scored their biggest hit since Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs with the film Cinderella in 1950. That launched the studio well into the decade of the 50s, but afterwards, Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan, their only fairy tale genre affair in the 1950s was Sleeping Beauty. They also had some live action features, Darby O'Gill and the Little People in 1959, Babes in Toyland in 1961, which was a Christmas musical film based on Victor Herbert's popular 1903 operetta, And another studio, 20th Century Fox, decided to counter with Snow White and the Three Stooges in 1961. Okay, we're now back to a sequence that the American version of Sampo, The Day the Earth Froze, does include, which is Lemon Common coming to the shore. And this time he's pissed. He's not going to fall for any trickery this time. So this is the sequence as you've seen it in The Day the Earth Froze. Back to the fairy tale chronology that Corman was in the midst of. Snow White and the Three Stooges came out in 1961. It was the only color feature film the Stooges ever did. It was a major studio release, 20th Century Fox. They poured a lot of money into it, $3.5 million. It was the most expensive film the Stooges ever starred in, but it tanked at the box office. And Mo Howard later referred to it as their Technicolor mistake. MGM also had the Cinerama production of The Wonderful World of Brothers Grimm, directed by George Powell, which came out in 1962. And that's what Corman, sort of ignored and decided, well, I'm gonna sell off this film, Sampo, as a science fiction feature. I'm going to try to make it look like a science fiction feature. The other curious thing about that, and though I understand where Corman was coming from because it hadn't really taken hold here in America, is there were also a number of other import fairy tale films that were making their way into the American market. The Italian film The Seven Dwarfs to the Rescue from 1951 eventually got released here in the 1960s. I'll talk about that a little bit later. We also had the whole Sword and Sandal Peplum film cycle, the mythology-based heroic fantasies, which were spun off from the historical and the biblical epic cycle. And those Italian films are probably closest to the flavor of Petrushko's Soviet productions and co-productions, starting with the success of the 1954 Kirk Douglas film Ulysses. Italy followed with a version of Siegfried, which played a little bit in American markets, primarily television, under the title The Dragon's Blood in 1957. That features Carlo Rambaldi's first ever on-screen movie monster, the dragon that Siegfried slays. Italian director Pietro Franceschi made Hercules in 1957, starring Steve Reeves. And when American theater owner, distributor, producer Joseph E. Levine acquired the U.S. distribution rights, Levine spent $1 million promoting the film and made more than $5 million profit when he released it stateside in 1959. And a sequel, Hercules Unchained, followed. And the success of those prompted Cecil B. DeMille to reissue Samson and Delilah from 1949, 10 years later in 59, and that kicked the whole heroic fantasy cycle into overdrive. We had about another 5 years of Italian maciste, Hercules, Goliath, Ursus, Samson movies being released here stateside. But Corman looked at Sampo and went, nope, science fiction. I'll try to sell this as a science fiction movie. In Germany, we had a real explosion of wonderful fairy tale films. Rumpelstiltskin in 55, The Donkey, the Table, and the Stick from 56, The Singing, Ringing Tree in 1957. Those made their way to America in the 60s thanks to K. Gordon Murray. Mexico, we had a whole explosion of fairy tale films in the 50s as well. Tom Thumb, the fairy tale like Santa Claus from 1959, which ended up winning the Golden Gate Award at the Best International Family Film at the San Francisco International Film Festival in 59. And that prompted K. Gordon Murray to import Santa Claus, release it every Christmas as matinee only. And that led to K. Gordon Murray picking up as many of the Mexican fairy tale films as he could. Little Red Riding Hood, The Little Red Riding Hood and Friends, Tom Thumb and Little Red Riding Hood, which K. Gordon Murray released here as Little Red Riding Hood and the Monsters. But those didn't hit the American market until the mid-60s. So, that's what Corman was up against. There wasn't a children's matinee market yet that had really taken hold with fantasy films. And for some reason, he chose not to put Sampo out there as a heroic fantasy film. Now, what was going on at the time with Soviet films is there was a specific studio, Art Kino Pictures, which was based on 7th Avenue in New York. And Art Kino had been around for a long time under a different name. They had been releasing Soviet films in various markets for quite a number of years, since the silent era. Art Kino had also been the outfit that released Alexander Petrushko's 1947 The Stone Flower, including playdates in America. It played in New York City in 1947. And appeared in some other American markets as well, and played internationally. And then, starting in 1940, I love this part, Lemminkainen just sort of comes walking out of the ocean, because that's what heroes can do. But as he comes stumbling out of the ocean, all that's left of the Sampo is this little fragment of the lid. But as we shall see, that has a magical power as well. So Art Kino became the studio of the distribution firm of that name, starting in 1940. And thanks to Brian Albright, who did some digging into some primary newspaper sources to help me out with this commentary track, he turned up a newspaper report from March 25th, 1940, from the Spokesman Review in Spokane, Washington. Distribution of Russian motion pictures in this country, which halted last month with the liquidation of Am Kino Corporation, will be resumed shortly by the newly formed Art Kino Picture Company. The new company was formed by N. Napoli. That's short for Nicholas Napoli, folks. Formerly general manager of Am Kino, and Rosa Maydell, who was also associated with Am Kino as film booker. Art Kino has taken over the office suite in 723 7th Avenue, New York, formerly occupied by Am Kino. And then in 1941, this is from July 29th, the Philadelphia Inquirer, owners plan court action for movies. The State Board of Censors yesterday clamped a final ban on the showing in Pennsylvania of 2 Russian-made motion pictures described by the board as pure Soviet propaganda. Immediately, the owner of the films, Nicholas Napoli, president of the Art Kino Company, threatened to go into court to demand the privilege of distributing them commercially. And what was happening, starting in 1941, we're in the World War II years, is there began to be a very aggressive clampdown from American theater owners and American distributors, as well as the State Department, toward the importation of Russian films. May 9th of 1942, concerning Art Kino, we have the war in Russia has had a strangely stimulating effect on the Soviet motion picture industry, according to Gregory Ersky, Russian film engineer now in charge of a purchasing commission in the United States. The documentary films have come into this country from Russia, have received more extensive bookings than any past Soviet films. Our Russian Front, One Day in Soviet Russia, and Defense of Moscow have all been presented with English commentary. Yet despite the increased interest in Russian film production, Nicholas Napoli, the president of Art Kino Pictures, agents for Soviet films, regrets that these films are confined to showings in specialized first-run theaters.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Starting in September of 1942, Brian turned up some articles indicating that the USSR was beginning to accept American films. A headline from the Los Angeles Times September 15th, 1942. The decision, according to Nicholas Napoli, head of Art Kino, grew out of the conference on American and British cinema held in Moscow last month and attending by representatives of the Soviet film industry. It is understood that Russia is particularly interested in getting subjects depicting great figures of America's past and those dealing with our war program. Well, all of that changed, of course, after World War II. And once we got into the McCarthy years and the demonization of Russia during Joseph Stalin's reign, Russian movies were suddenly very problematic in the American market. Here's from May 1st, 1952. Brian Albright turned up another article from the Spokesman Review from Spokane, Washington. Russian movies. The writer is Stephen Andrews. Quote, Russia is carrying its peace propaganda campaign into principal American cities with the apparent official sanction of the United States government. The campaign is pitched on a new Soviet feature film, Peace Will Win, depicting the communists in their favorite role of champions of world peace. The government confirmed today that it has made no effort to keep this film out of the country or to stop Art Kino Pictures Company, a registered Soviet agency, from distributing it in American cities. The film has been shown in New York, Boston, and other eastern cities since its release last January 19th. It is expected to be shown in other cities in coming weeks. The Justice Department said the picture was one of 5 Soviet feature films which Art Kino has imported into the United States in the last 8 months. The agency also distributes Soviet shorts and newsreels. Since Art Kino is registered as a foreign agent, as required by the Foreign Agents Registration Act, justice officials said they had no authority under the law to stop the film from being shown. So long as the film meets the requirements of Rule 400 as to proper labeling, indicating that it is a Soviet movie, it can be distributed under the Foreign Agent Statute, an official said. Now, the problem became, though, having to label it as a Russian film meant that Art Kino's ability to get this film into theaters during the Cold War was seriously compromised. This became even a bigger problem when we get to films like Alexander Petrushko's Sadko, Alexander Petrushko's Ilya Muromets, and the film we're watching now, Sampo. By the end of the 50s, and again, Sampo was finished and released in 1959 in Russia, Finland, and other parts of the world, labeling a film Russian was a kiss of death in the American market. Now, at the same time that Roger Corman ended up purchasing the rights to releasing Sampo, he was also purchasing the rights to some other USSR science fiction films and USSR and co-productions with other countries' science fiction films, including The Sky is Calling from 1959 and Planeta Bur, Planet of Storms, another Soviet film from 1962. However, what Corman did is he repackaged those films. He reinvented them. In the case of Planet of Storms, it was turned into a number of other movies, including Voyage to the Prehistoric Planet and Voyage to the Planet of Prehistoric Women. The Sky is Calling was altered and rearranged by no less than Francis Ford Coppola into Battle Beyond the Sun. And Corman released that via his film group in 1962. Quoting Rob Craig from his excellent book, American International Pictures, A Comprehensive Filmography, published in 2019, quote, The Day the Earth Froze is the Americanized version of Sampo. The Finland-Soviet Union co-production is a beautiful and awesome fantasy with amazing special effects, stunning vistas, and bigger-than-life characters. There are breathtaking sets, an astute use of optical effects, and some wonderful miniatures work, all of which can effectively convey a surreal fantasy land of ancient mythology brought to life. Sadly, Sampo may have been a bad choice to try to adapt to U.S. drive-in audiences. Executive producer Roger Corman cut out about a third of the original film, restructured the rest, added perfunctory narration by Marvin Miller. By the way, Marvin Miller was best known at the time for his role on TV's popular series The Millionaire. back to Rob Craig's quote, and created outlandish pseudonyms for cast and crew, all in a vain attempt to disguise the result as an American science fiction tale. The result is an engaging but definitely strange film, which could not but look extremely foreign to domestic audiences. This was one of the last Film Group theatrical releases. The Day the Earth Froze was subsequently leased to American International Television and offered in their Amazing 65 and Sci-Fi 65 syndication packages, a true odd duck in the already eclectic American International Pictures canon, unquote. And I have confirmed that The Day the Earth Froze was in those 2 TV packages by consulting a number of sources. Okay, we're now at the point in Sampo where Lohi is going to have her revenge for the theft of Sampo by stealing the sun. Now, we are now well over an hour, 68 minutes into Sampo. In the American version, we are only about 50 minutes, 45, 48 minutes into The Day the Earth Froze. So, however you look at it, this is the point in the film that the audiences in America were promised by the title, The Day the Earth Froze, was going to come, and it's finally here. By the way, the title that Corman chose is interesting to me. The Day the Earth Froze was released in July of 1963. But what's interesting is I found 2 other things named The Day the Earth Froze, one of which I knew about and one of which Brian Albright brought to my attention. Brian Albright pointed out to me there was an episode of Fireball XL5, the Jerry and Sylvia Anderson science fiction puppet show that used to play on Saturday mornings here in America, an episode that was called The Day the Earth Froze, broadcast on June 9th, 1963. I also used to own a paperback, which was published by Monarch Books, which was the paperback imprint of Charlton Comics out of Connecticut. And it was a science fiction paperback by Gerald Hatch called The Day the Earth Froze. The cover says, "Mankind was facing a terrible new ice age, and no one knew how to halt the deadly event." What's curious to me is that The Day the Earth Froze, appearing as a Monarch paperback, turns up at the same time that Monarch Paperback was licensing titles from American International Pictures. Very, very strange. Okay, let's talk about the American release of The Day the Earth Froze. Quoting my friend Brian Albright, quote, "I could not find any listings for Sampo on newspapers.com," unquote. And that, to the best of my ability and Brian's ability and that of a couple of other folks who helped me with research, demonstrated that Sampo, under the title Sampo, probably never played theatrically in the United States anywhere. It did not turn up until it appeared under the title The Day the Earth Froze. Chris Poggiali also helped me with researching the American release of the film. And the first clipping that Chris turned up was from Variety, Wednesday, November 21st, 1962. Film Group production separate but domestic handling via American International. American International Pictures is taking over domestic distribution of Roger Corman's Film Group Productions. It was revealed jointly yesterday. And by the way, yesterday would mean Tuesday, November 20th, 1962. Back to the article. By AIP, Proxy, James H. Nicholson, and Film Group head Corman. It was emphasized that Film Group will continue to maintain its separate identity as a production company and has blueprinted a 15-picture sked for the next 2 years. Cost of the sked is said to be $12 million. Film Group product heretofore has been distributed via its own net of domestic franchisers. The Corman Company will also maintain its own ad publicity department, with AIP functioning only as releasing org for Corman, in addition to handling its own AIP roster. Well, it ended up that didn't happen. Corman basically gave up on Film Group altogether. Chris Poggiali also turned up the following. In New Orleans, the apparent premiere of The Day the Earth Froze happened in June of 1963. Chris wrote to me, and I quote with permission, "From what I could find, it looks like the New Orleans territory got the film first in summer of 1963, which leads me to suspect a drive-in owner or small theater chain had money in it, and Corman was making sure they got the investment back before the film went to AIP. He's had similar arrangements with Woolner Brothers, Howco International, run by Joy Houck, and other theater owners throughout the years," unquote. And what Chris turned up in Box Office Magazine, June 10th, 1963, the Southeast edition, N. Urovich of Renaissance Films was here to screen his The Day the Earth Froze, made in Finland, unquote. Now, Tim Lucas noted in Video Watchdog number 9 that he was curious where this Renaissance Films turned up from. Well, like, what is Renaissance Films? It's the only release we can find associated with that particular moniker. And Corman at the time was often using other names other than Film Group to put Film Group titles into theaters. So unless other evidence turns up from elsewhere, I'm going to presume, for the purposes of this commentary, that Renaissance Films was just a name that Corman was using, as he often used other names lifted from California towns and cities quite often, to sort of hide that Film Group was the distribution firm. Chris also turned up from Box Office Magazine, June 17th, 1963, quote, F.F. Goodrow has procured Renaissance Films' The Day the Earth Froze for distribution in the New Orleans territory. The film is described as the first color scope production to be filmed in Finland, unquote. And what I want to bring to your attention, and this makes sense of Corman changing all the names of the actors, the names of the directors and the technicians, is they were hiding completely the Soviet origin of Sampo. They were disguising The Day the Earth Froze as just a Finnish film, if they mentioned Finland at all. Brian Albright turned up the first newspaper clipping he could find for a release of The Day the Earth Froze, popping up in the Daily News in New York City, Sunday, July 14th, 1963, where The Day the Earth Froze, oddly enough, was on the bottom of a double bill with a Walt Disney family film, the Western Savage Sam. Very odd double bill there. It was at the it was at the 303 Drive-In in Orangeburg. Brian then turned up, very interesting thing, July 17th, opening of The Day the Earth Froze in Corpus Christi, Texas. The theater there decided to do a promotional campaign. This is the campaign. Would you like a screen test? Just arrived from Hollywood, in conjunction with the spectacular motion picture The Day the Earth Froze, which starts at the Ayers Theater, July 17th. Mr. N. Urovich is searching for young talent. Screen test absolutely free for anyone selected. Applications available at Ayers Theater box office and in Downtowner Motor Inn registration desk. This might be your opportunity to be in Hollywood. Apply now. The same day, July 17th, also in the Corpus Christi Times, out of Corpus Christi, Texas, Talent Search Here. A talent search for children and young adults for work in the movies will be held at the Ayers Theater in conjunction with the color movie The Day the Earth Froze, opening July 17th. Then Chris Poggiali turned up in the trade publication Box Office the following year, June 15th, 1964, an article on American International's release schedule. The article is entitled, Biggest Release Schedule in Its History Marks AIP's Decade of Progress. In the very last paragraph, the last 3 lines, already in the release for January through May, are, and they're listing titles, and among those titles, Goliath and the Vampires, an action drama, The Day the Earth Froze, an unearthly stranger, science fiction dramas, Evil Eye and Black Sabbath, horror dramas. Almost a year later, a half year later, January 25th, 1965, Box Office finally runs a trade review in their feature review section at the end of the magazine for The Day the Earth Froze. And this, I will read to you, this is the Renaissance Films, and it says in parentheses, states' rights, release information that Box Office published. Quote, budgeted at $1 million, the financing in part emanating from the Finnish government, this Julia Strandberg production, teaming Nina Anderson and John Powers, should be welcome stateside for its very novelty alone. Essentially a folktale of peasant folk in ancient Finland, putting their common sense and wholesome taste against a vindictive and vicious she-witch, it contains introductory narration by Marvin Miller, who will be readily remembered from the popular long-running television series The Millionaire. Miss Anderson projects an engaging delineation of the fetching girl to whom John Powers, a venturesome young man, is betrothed, and Ingrid Elhart serves up a memorable portrayal of the aforementioned witch, intent on spreading death and destruction when her avaricious scheming comes to naught. Jermone Langstrom's special effects are impressive, particularly in the climactic sequences. Greg Sebelius has attended to direction, seemingly ever mindful of the need for fanciful touches in treatment of a legend that's been told countless times in Finland. Actual shooting is said to have taken 2 full years because of constantly adverse weather conditions, unquote. Well, at least there's one line of truth at the end of that it took 2 years to make it. By the way, please take note at this point in the climax, the remarkable innovation to me of Sampo and its importance to future fantasy films. The decision to use music.
How to have fun, anytime, anywhere. Step 1. Go to ChumbaCasino.com.
ChumbaCasino.com. Got it.
Step 2. Collect your welcome bonus.
Come to Papa welcome bonus.
Step 3. Play hundreds of casino-style games for free.
That's a lot of games. All for free?
Step 4. Unleash your excitement.
Woohoo!
Chumba Casino has been delivering thrills for over a decade. So claim your free welcome bonus now and live the Chumba life. Visit ChumbaCasino.com.
VGW Group. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
To use a creative tool to counter Lohie's evil is probably the most imaginative aspect of Sampo. And some of you may have chuckled earlier when I brought up Yellow Submarine, but it's true. Think about the ending of the animated feature film, The Beatles' Yellow Submarine. All you need is love. It isn't love that conquered the Blue Meanies and saved Pepperland. It was music. It was the Beatles' music. And this is the precursor to Yellow Submarine. This use of harps, of playing this unusual music as a way to lull Lohie's tribe of warlocks and sorcerers and lackeys into a sort of a coma state where they can't even lift their blades, their swords, their bows and arrows. This plays as silly to a lot of contemporary American viewers, but this is a really powerful message to be putting out there. And I think it's one of the things that makes Sampo a very timely film today, given especially the events of 2022 thus far, as I'm speaking to you and recording this commentary track. The idea of a creative solution to confronting and fighting rather than conventional weaponry is something that was an original thought at the height of the Cold War in 1959. A fairly subversive thing to be putting out there in a USSR Finland co-production, and it rings true today, pun intended. Production story. Conceived in the dreams of antiquity by a vigorous, proud people, The Day the Earth Froze proclaims the vast scope of man's limitless imagination. Only the life-breathing widescreen camera reproduces this unexcelled legend. More than an absorbing story, more than a legendary spectacular, this film, forming the perfect communion between art and nature, represents a moving entertainment experience. Budgeted at an even $1 million and financed in part by the Finnish government, the actual shooting ran over the anticipated cost and took 2 full years of production. Filmed in the heart of Finland under adverse weather conditions, the short dry season forced the crew to work often under the severest of conditions. At times, sudden torrential rains would wash away huge sets, while drenching valuable cameras and equally valuable cameramen. The authenticity of costumes and sets was laboriously worked out by research crews. Members were sent to the National Museum of Finnish History to make studies of ancient costumes and customs. However, the results proved worthy of the effort. The fantastic color range, the forging of them in the furnace, the flow of the Sampo are further indelible tributes to the picture's genius. Okay, following through with the American distribution pattern for The Day the Earth Froze, Brian Albright also turned up an ad from December 4th, 1965. Yep, as they promised in 1964, AIP was rolling out multiple bills of their science fiction titles at the Highway Drive-In in Fort Lauderdale area in Florida. In December of 1965, Vincent Price in The Last Man on Earth, The Earth Dies Screamin' from 20th Century Fox, and AIP's double bill Unearthly Stranger in The Day the Earth Froze. I guess that would be almost a Dusk to Dawn show. 4 giant science fiction hits. Tampa Bay Times, also from December 1965, the same 4 giant science fiction hits: The Earth Dies Screaming, Last Man on Earth, The Unearthly Stranger, and finally The Day the Earth Froze. Brian Albright also turned up December 18th, 1966 in the Baytown Sun in Baytown, Texas, an AIP triple bill at the Decker Drive-In: Fireball 500, The Wild Angels, Roger Corman's Hell's Angels movie, and The Day the Earth Froze. December 19th, 1966, the Chicago Tribune. Brian turned up a clipping in which a drive-in was playing Ambush Bay, Duel at Diablo, and The Day the Earth Froze. Brian also turned up from January 26, 1967 in Illinois, Crystal Lake, Illinois, a matinee. Shop and Show matinee, January 28th, The Day the Earth Froze. May 20th, 1967. It's still playing in theaters. Bear in mind, May 20th, 1967. Here it is playing in Owensboro, Kentucky. It's the bottom of a triple bill. Johnny Tiger, the Gregory Peck, Sophia Loren thriller Arabesque, and The Day the Earth Froze. This means 2 years after AIP had released it to television, it was still playing in theaters. Here's the point in time where Lohi's cloak gets its comeuppance. I referred to earlier it being this sort of sentient being, and here it meets its demise. Pay close attention to the sounds and the gurgling and the, sort of water fireworks that go on with drowning Lohi's cloak. The last showing that any of us could find, myself, Brian Albright, the last showing any of us could find, Chris Poggiali found March 22nd, 1976. Box Office Magazine indicated that in Springfield, Massachusetts, there was a Saturday-Sunday matinee kiddie show with special prices at the Bing in Springfield. 2 feature-length films, War of the Zombies and The Day the Earth Froze, charging $1 for all patrons for all seats at the 1:30 screenings on both Saturday and Sunday. Okay, so The Day the Earth Froze had a long, healthy run here in America, but it isn't until the year 2022 that we finally get to see Sampo as it was meant to be seen. And here is the glorious finale of Sampo as our heroes return after overcoming Lohi. In the American version of The Day the Earth Froze, there's a whole narration from Marvin Miller about how love conquers all. But here in the actual ending of Petrushko's Sampo, the final words fall to the heroic elder. Greetings, day. Give us happiness henceforth to live life in peace and harmony. And I wish the same to all of you. I hope you've enjoyed this film. As I said right from the outset, I think this movie is a real masterpiece, and thanks for joining us for Sampo.
I am Adam Lundy, co-host of They Live by Film, a podcast dedicated to bringing you film discussion and interviews from around the world. Every week, my co-hosts Chris Haskell, Zach Bryant and I discuss a wide range of films, from monumental classics like Vertigo and The Rules of the Game, to the craziest, schlockiest movies ever made like Deathbed and everything in between. We are also lucky enough to have sat down with some of the biggest players in the boutique Blu-ray and film restoration game. If this is your thing, then come hang out with us every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, wherever you normally stream your podcasts, and now as part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Thank you for listening. To hear more shows from the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, please select the link in the description.
Looking for excitement? Chumba Casino is here. Play anytime, play anywhere. Play on the train, play at the store, play at home, play when you're bored. Play today for your chance to win and get daily bonuses when you log in. So what are you waiting for? Don't delay. Chumba Casino is free to play.
Experience social gameplay like never before. Go to Chumba Casino right now to play hundreds of games, including online slots, bingo, Slingo, and more. Live the Chumba life at ChumbaCasino.com.
VGW Group. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
The future is a hefty responsibility and not one that we take lightly, but then taking things lightly has never been what Hefty is about. That's why we've created the Hefty Renew program that turns hard-to-recycle plastics into valuable resources like park benches and building materials. To participate, simply fill up an orange Hefty Renew bag with accepted items, tie it up, and drop it in with your regular recycling. That's it. It's that easy. It's time to rethink recycling with Renew. Particular valued resources may vary by geography. More info available at heftyrenew.com.